much is this moment worth? $100? 1,000? The moments of your life are priceless. Are you saving them on the right film? Kodak Gold. No other film gives you truer, more consistent color, picture after picture.
Right, welcome to the channel. Thank you for joining. Hope you like that little nostalgia trip there to get you in the mood. So today we're going to be talking about the Kodak 200 Colour Plus and the Porta 400. So one film's pretty standard, really good in all conditions, entry level if you like, cheap as chips, that type of film, and the other one isn't. A little bit more expensive, more specific to weddings and portraits. So we're going to go through that today. If you like this type of content, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I'd really love to get to 1,000 subscribers this year. That is my aim. So please, if you like this content, hit that subscribe button. I'll be putting out 2 videos a month specifically on 35mm film. Maybe even medium format, you know, if I get a casual camera thrown my way. So if you want to know what my channel's about, it's pretty much going to be that, general photography, and then just about me really. And then the third one I'm going to do is I really wanted to get into making short films, so every quarter, starting in February, every 3 months, I'm going to put a short film out. Really put thought and design and sort of, yeah, just put a lot of effort into it, so I'm really excited to put these videos out there. It starts on the 25th of February, and the first one I want to put out there is going to be about social media. So I just want to put out what I've learned, maybe on how we can change our behaviours to have a better experience about all this type of stuff. So yeah, nothing too... Kodak produced the Kodacolor, the first colour negative they did. As you progress through, you get from Kodacolor to Kodacolor X to Kodacolor VR to all these different things. You start to get to the late 80s and then the 90s. And at that point, the Kodacolor, which was a really well sold film, was rebranded. And it was rebranded to the Kodak 200 Colour Plus. Why? Because at the time, in the 90s or late 80s, the Kodak Gold was an absolute gem and they loved it. It did really well, and they wanted to get another film out there that they could market that wasn't quite as expensive as the Gold to try and infiltrate that market, and that's exactly what they did. It was exactly the same stock. It didn't change one bit. So although it's evolved all the way back from that Kodacolor back in the 40s, and that's the foundation for it, you now have the Kodak 200 Colour Plus. So what about the Porta 400? Well, completely different. In 1998-99, Porta 400 came out. It was designed, developed and specifically targeted at the wedding and portrait photography market. Simple as that. So in fairness, this is as modern as you're going to get, because in 1998, if you remember, the digital age hadn't taken off. You didn't know which way it was going to go, so they're still developing film, still throwing money into it and still thinking this could be, well, maybe that's a bit of a lie actually. I think they knew the digital was going to take over, but ultimately that's when it came out. It was meant to be a bit higher contrast, slightly bit higher ISO, so that it could be working as a bit better in day and night. Then, in 2010, they had another major update, something to improve the grain and the scanning capabilities of the film. So, in relative respects, this film is very modern. Right, first up, Kodak Colour Plus 200. So this one is what they call, first off, a consumer film. That just means it's mass produced, and because of that, it's the cheapest, so really good to start out using this film. It's aimed at people that want to take photos in pretty much all conditions. I found it's probably best really in mid-afternoon light, but yeah, any conditions it can just about hold it up, and that is what it's aimed at. Versus the Porta 400, well, the Porta 400 is different. This is designed and particularly aimed for people that were taking wedding photos and sort of portrait photos around the late 90s, early noughties. Contrast in the colours are a bit more defined, and definitely the saturation is a little bit different as well, and the colour palette obviously because it's a different film. Right, first up, colours and contrasts. Well, this first photo, this is on the 200 plus. Well, brightish day. It was actually quite cloudy, but it was middle of the summer, so yeah, lots and lots of light and really nice colours. No editing on this at all, no sort of advances in colours or anything like that on any of these photos, and this one sort of shows you how you get some nice sort of blues. The hat on the little girl is quite light blue anyway, but look at the dress, you can see that sort of dark blue that it gets, which I think is really, really nice, and then contrast that with the lighter blues into whites into the sea. Really, really good. But everything is quite, yeah, middle of the road, shall we say. Now compare that to this next one, which granted is a different time of year, but it's the Porta 400, and I did this because the blues in the jacket and the whites are quite similar. The blue, that dark blue, when I lined it up, is very, very, very similar to the dark blue in the dress, so you get a really, really good idea of the difference now in the colours and maybe the contrast of that colours, which I think is really interesting. So you can see there that everything's a little bit more defined, like I said before, because the contrast is deeper, if you want to call it that, and then at the same time the grain is finer as well, and that's the difference you're going to get with sort of, yeah, those two images. Right, so colours and contrast still, and looking more at the Porta 400. So these shots were all in autumn, and straight away you can see simple shots of the trees, but just look at the nice colours and how it sort of goes from the green to the orange to the reds. And on this second one particularly, I really like that first image personally, just nice sort of isolated tree, really like that one. The second one not so much, but I was looking at the colours, so just look how the Porta 400 basically just defines all the different colours, and autumn is the perfect time for that. So what I mean by that is there's just every colour going there, from green to red to sort of amber to yellow, and it really picks them out. Whereas I do think if I take that type of photo with a 200 plus, you'll see the subtle differences. Now the one I can compare that to is this one of my little girl. She's going to go mad if I show this, but there you go. And this one is really, really interesting because the colours are very, very, very similar. There might only be a slight difference, but you can see the difference between the pictures. You still get some of those reds, you definitely get the yellows, because I feel like you get that yellow tint in that film anyway, but you don't quite get that definition, and it is your style. So if that's what you're going for one day, then maybe look at Porta 400. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a 200 plus. I love it, but that's the difference for you, and that's what I find anyway, in my opinion, between the colours and contrasts. Really, really good films. So first picture I'll show you is this one. This one's an interesting one because it is, yeah, really brightish day, but it was very overcast where I was stood, but out to sea you can see the bright sky. But if you actually look a bit closely, there is quite a lot of grain in that sky, and this is probably the main difference between a colour plus film, standard, like we said before, all-purpose film, and something like a quite established Porta 400 professional, and that's something called latitude. I'm not going to go into the crazy details if you've not really known about it before. There's lots of blogs and people that know a hell of a lot more than me, but so it basically just means that the Colour Plus doesn't really compensate as well as a Porta 400 would, and it creates this grain. This second photo you'll see in a little bit more detail is a real prime example. You can see on this one it's a lot darker, but what you can see is a lot of grain. It's actually quite a cool image. I quite like it actually, but really that's because it can't compensate, if you like, for the really dark parts from the more lighter parts, from those blacks to the whites. And again, this is not a tech review, but ultimately that's what happens, and you might like that. So if that's the type of film you want, you might actually end up preferring something like a Colour Plus because it gives you that look. Now compare that to this image, which is a Porta 400. This was all natural indoor light, and it is very, very dark in my house, and I'm going to show you one in a second that I'll put some light on to compare it. What you can see here is these real dark sort of shadows. I pushed this as far as I could on my Nikon F301, which is a very old camera, and that's why there's a little bit of shake, but I really aim for the pencil because we're just a little bit of light that we're chinking through the window, but you can sort of see very, very little grain, particularly around the edges of like Clemmy's arms to the right, definitely where it was really, really quite dark. And that's the type of thing that it can do. It's because when developing it, it can really compensate for those really dark parts of the picture and those really light ones. So just to show you some perspective, this is actually when I put some artificial light on. Cracking little photo, I love this so much. The light's on her face, you can see to the right how dark it would be, and again, just really, really nice natural comparison. And that for me is your prime example of what you're going to get. So if you were shooting a wedding or a sort of, you know, portrait, these types of things, these are the things that you're going to pull out from a Porta 400 that you would if you did it with a Colour Plus in the same picture. It'd be a lot of grain on there, so that's your choice.
there's a big difference in cost. I got these Kodaks for something like £3 of film, whereas the Porta 400 is more, it's double. So with that, in fact, I'll do it in Batman's voice. So with that comes greater responsibilities. That's my Batman voice. Anyway, it does make you think, well, I want a bit more from it. So with that in mind, they're both excellent films. I love shooting them in different contexts, really. If tomorrow I went out and my wife said, I just want you to do really nice pictures of just me and Clemmy running around, then I would grab the Porta 400. Particularly if you said, we're going out for the day, we're going to be there till night, Porta 400 would really cope really, really well with it, and it'd feel really good. I know I could trust it, it'd be fine, I'd get loads of images out. If we were going for a nice little casual stroll around the park in the afternoon, and I was getting similar ones, I would not hesitate, I'd grab the 200 Colour Plus, it would not bother me one bit. And the same if I just don't know what I want, if I maybe want a bit of this and a bit of that and nothing specific, then I'd just get the Colour Plus, to be honest. So the Porta 400, because it's more expensive, I do tend to use it with something in mind, whereas this is the thing is, I'm laughing because this is exactly what they marketed it for. The Colour Plus is an all-purpose film, you put it in when you're not too sure. The Porta 400 is obviously for portraits and weddings and that type, or I don't really take landscapes on film, still do that on digital a lot, but if I was and I wanted that higher contrast, maybe a sunset directly shooting into the sun, then actually I would choose Porta 400 every day. But I would just say, if you're starting out and you've come across this one, then I would start with the Kodak 200 Plus, or the Fuji 200, and just get sort of to feel for it. For me, I prefer the Kodak over the Fuji, just because there's more yellows than the greens for the Fuji, but there's another film on that and I'll put a link above right now. Yeah, just enjoy it, but do remember one thing. In fact, I'll tell you what, let's go back to that guy who sat in the living room.
So thank you very much for watching, and just remember, the single most important component of a camera is 12 inches behind it.